Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the Garden Hour with MU Extension. We are happy to be here. My name is Debi Kelly. I am a field specialist in horticulture in Boone County. I'm also the State Extension Master Gardener Coordinator. So if you've got questions about the Master Gardener program in any capacity, if got questions, just email me or send me a little note on chat here today, and I'm happy to answer anything you might like to know. We're excited, as we are every single week when we're working with the Garden Hour. We have tons and tons of great questions that come in and tons of lots of knowledge in our head that we enjoy sharing with you. So just to get you jump started, here are all of us across the state. I do want to let you know that this map needs to be updated. Manoj Chetri has left Extension and gone to Penn State University, and we wish him well. So some of these different counties that are up in the Northwest are changed just a little bit. And as soon as we can, we'll get this map updated. But in the meantime, if you're in any of those counties that was with Manoj, feel free to reach out to any one of us that are around in those counties, or someone that you listen on here and you're like, wow, I really like that person. I'd like to talk to them. Just feel free to reach out to one of us. We're always happy to talk to you. Oops, I don't want to go to that slide just yet. So on today, we have Dr. Dave Trinklein's going to be on with us, Jennifer Schutter from Kirksville, Donna Aufdenberg from Cape Girardeau, Katie Kammler from St. Genevieve. Then we have a surprise that we're going to show you. I'm excited about that. And then we also have Jared. He's behind the scenes and he does all the technology for us and creates the snippets and the videos and all those things. And without him, we wouldn't be able to do this. So we offer a great appreciation and thank you to Jared. So what I'd like to do right now is to go ahead and turn this over. We're going to listen to the weather report. Zach couldn't be with us, but he has a recording. And so Jared, let's go ahead and get that started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Missouri Weekly Weather Summary. And I want to start today by taking a look back here. We do have our official statewide data from the month of August now, and so we can take a look at our statewide average temperature during the month of August, which was 75.7 degrees Fahrenheit. How does that compare to normal? Well, we about hit the August statewide average temperature right on the nose here. So you can see that average is actually 76 degrees, and we were just 0.3 degrees Fahrenheit below average. But perhaps more notably, what we see here is now, even though August was pretty close to average, we do have two back-to-back months with cooler than average temperatures in July and August. And so we've really backed off that trend of warmer temperatures that we were seeing from February through June to start out the year of 2024. But still, even with the past couple months being slightly cooler than average, our year-to-date temperatures through August are still just above 3 degrees above average. So still actually on pace for the fourth warmest year on record, despite a little bit of a cool down relatively here in July and August. Now looking at temperature, or excuse me, looking at precipitation, we also broke a little bit of a streak here in August, because it's no surprise for most of us. It's been a dry month and a dry September as well. So what we saw is our statewide average precipitation during the month of August was 2.81 inches. And this is nearly an inch below average, so 0.90 inches below average. And certainly across the state, when we look at the statewide average precipitation, some locations were even drier, while some locations were okay during the month and did receive that rainfall. But overall, most locations were dry. And so we can see so far throughout the growing season, really, April through July, we've had above average precipitation, but August, we really flipped the switch and in some locations really turned the faucet off as far as receiving more rainfall during the month of August. And so we see this trend here, but overall, our average precipitation is still above average for the entire year. So if we look at that January through August period here, still running about 3.5 inches above average. So right now, through the first 8 months of the year, our statewide average precipitation, 31.5 inches there. But as we've gotten into September, after a dry August, we have really not seen any rainfall continue into the month of September here. So on the right is a map just showing our accumulated precipitation in the first 10 days of September. And we see a lot of gray on this map, especially in northern Missouri, where no rainfall has fallen. But even the yellows here just showing maybe a few hundredths of an inch. There have been some isolated totals of around an inch across really extreme southern Missouri, but a very dry start to September so far. And also, if we look on the left here, we see, of course, all of our major sites already behind on rainfall for the month, anywhere between really just about an inch to an inch and a half below normal so far for the month. But even more remarkable at this point are the temperatures. And so we've actually had some cool days, but really a lot of cool overnight lows as well. And so right now, temperatures running anywhere from 2.5 degrees below average for the month so far in Cape Girardeau, to 5.9 degrees below average so far in Columbia. So a pretty cool start to the month of September and really seeing some of that more fall-like temperatures so far. Now, as we head into September, it is fall, and we typically see our temperatures start to cool off here. But I do want to note that it's really still a pretty wet month here for the state of Missouri. So on the left, we can see our monthly averages for precipitation, and we see September is really our third wettest month here in Missouri. So on average, about 4 inches of precipitation. And so when we think about keeping up with the amount of water we're used to seeing climatologically, really anywhere between 3/4 to an inch of rainfall per week during this time. So as we're going into the fall, still climatologically, do expect that 4 inches of rainfall here during September. But as we've seen, we haven't received that rainfall so far in September, and coming off a dry August, we continue to really worry about dryness that's starting to encroach upon all of Missouri. Very few spots are not at least a little bit dry right now, and so do want to point out here, this is our U.S. Drought Monitor map that was released on Thursday, September 5th. As we can see here, a lot of the yellow across the state showing D0 or abnormally dry conditions, but also these tan areas are moderate drought. And so we can see in west central Kansas along the Kansas, or excuse me, west central Missouri along the Kansas border here, the Kansas City metro in that moderate drought, the St. Louis metro, and also southeastern Missouri from Cape Girardeau farther down into the Boot Heel, all in moderate drought. And we will have a new U.S. Drought Monitor map that's released tomorrow. But again, after seeing that we really haven't picked up any rainfall in September, would expect even more coverage of abnormally dry or moderate drought conditions across the state. So pretty much all of us could really use a lot of rain or at least some rain at this point. But looking back so far at September, with not seeing much rain, the story's actually been some pretty cool temperatures so far throughout the month. And so I did want to show these are some of the coldest temperatures we've seen, coldest minimum temperatures so far in September. Several locations getting below 40 degrees, including a few airport observations. So this isn't St. Louis International, but the smaller Spirit of St. Louis Airport around 40. And then we also see here Kirksville getting down to 40 and the Salem Airport getting down to 37. And then we have a couple of co-op or human observations here. Round Spring getting down to 36 and not confirmed at this point, but a 31-degree temperature reading here in Worth County. And so really those upper 30s, some patchy frost possible across the state in those late weekend days here in September. So we see a lot of these occurred between September 8th through the 10th here, so later in our last weekend. And so I showed this last week, and it's remarkable because when we look at those first or median date of our temperature falling below 32 degrees during the fall, we're usually about a month out from that. So looking at northern Missouri, that second to third week of October, not September. And so definitely a pretty impressive early September chill that we saw with those temperatures. But looking ahead, most of our forecast for the next week is going to rely really entirely on Hurricane Francine. And so on the left is the 4 a.m. Central Advisory from the National Hurricane Center showing Hurricane Francine really sitting just southwest of Louisiana in the Gulf of Mexico, expected to make landfall in Louisiana later on today as a Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane. But if we look at this white cone from the National Hurricane Center, this shows kind of the expected track of that hurricane. So as it comes on land into Louisiana, expected to weaken pretty quickly to a tropical storm. But then as it continues to weaken into a tropical depression, by Friday, 1 a.m. Friday to 1 p.m. Friday, we're seeing that that center of the circulation of the much weaker tropical depression could be centered over the Boot Heel in Missouri, meaning we'll lose some of the tropical characteristics with the strong winds, but still keep some of that storm and heavy rainfall activity with that system. And so if we look here on the right, this is our 7-day precipitation forecast, and almost all of the colors you see on this map are associated here with Hurricane Francine for our area. And so we can see in Missouri a pretty tight gradient in the precipitation forecast. So getting down into the Boot Heel, those bright reds, 3 to 4 inches of rainfall that's forecasted. And then we see those purples, anywhere from 1.5 inches to 3 inches of rainfall across southeastern Missouri. But then it's a really sharp cutoff. The dark blue is about 1/2 inch, and anywhere you see these greens across the rest of the state, anywhere from 1/10 to 1/2 inch of rainfall, which is not enough to keep up with what we seasonally expect. And so do expect some winters from Francine and maybe some drought-busting rainfall, but I do expect a sharp cutoff in totals to the north and west, and some may miss out that really need that rainfall, especially if you're in western Missouri. But we will have to keep an eye on this forecast as Francine moves on shore. We could continue to see the shifts in that track that could make some pretty big differences in our rainfall totals. But hopefully we can see as much as Missouri getting that Francine rainfall as possible, because it's definitely a needed rainfall. Temperatures over the next few days will be seasonal. And then after that, into the weekend, it really depends on the track of Francine and how long it kind of sticks around too. And so, for example, here we look at high temperatures on Friday in the upper 60s in southeast Missouri, where it's going to be very rainy, but areas that are dry up in St. Joe, 84 degrees for a high. And so we're really just going to have to watch that cloud cover and shower activity to see how it impacts the temperatures. But we do expect Francine to kind of clear out of the area over the weekend. And looking ahead, this is our 8 to 14 day outlook here. And so this is going to be valid for our third week of September going into next week. Very high probability of above average temperatures here. So 70 to 80% chance of warmer than average temperatures in that week too. So definitely expect the return of some heat and maybe some September 90-degree readings as we get into next week. Not a strong forecast on precipitation, leaning above average or wetter conditions for week 2, but we'll have to see how that forecast looks after Francine. And so that's all I've got for today, and thanks for everyone's time.
I don't know about you guys, but I am very dry here in Boone County. The horticulture folks across the state, we get together about 8:30 on Wednesday mornings via Zoom, and most all of us said, yeah, it was pretty dry out. So should be interesting to see what that drought monitor map shows and indicates tomorrow. I fully expect most of the state to at least be in a yellow. What I'd like to do is go ahead and switch gears here, and we're going to have Jennifer come on and visit with us about some things. We do have an Ask a Missouri Master Gardener Facebook page, and there's lots of questions that come on and out through that. And we are really appreciative of our Master Gardener volunteers who monitor that and answer those questions. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and drop in to the chat box the Facebook page in case some of you aren't on it would like to join. Go ahead, Jennifer.
All right, thank you, Debbie, and good afternoon, everyone. And what I'm going to do is show a photo, and I would like your participation. So I would like you to type in the chat box what you think the plant is, and then Debbie is going to read off your answers. So let's start with this one right here. What is this plant with the pink flowers?
I'm seeing a lot of folks coming on saying sedum, but I'll tell you what I called it when I was growing up as a kid. We called it a frog belly.
Really, I haven't heard that before. Frog belly.
Mhm.
Interesting. So yes, it is a sedum, and that one is autumn joy sedum. I grow this one in a flower bed at my house. Let's go on to this one.
I'm not seeing any. Liriope.
Correct. This is liriope, also known as lily turf. This one is common in borders. You may use this in a border bed. It grows low. It has purple flowers. This one's pretty common. What about this? This came up as a volunteer, and this one I did take from the Ask a Master Gardener Facebook page. Anybody know what this is? And I'll just tell you, it is a tree. Any
Magnolia.
responses?
Magnolia? Persimmon?
That's a good guess. That's a shingle oak. I've actually had this confirmed. So shingle oak right there. All right, what about this one?
Hibiscus, hydrangea, hibiscus.
What kind of hibiscus? Anybody want to take a guess at what kind of hibiscus? And is it hardy or is it tropical?
One says tropical, one says red, one says rose mallow, tropical.
All right, I'm looking for tropical hibiscus. And I like tropical hibiscus, and I've been growing them for several years now. I just think they're so pretty. And here are some of the different ones that I've either grown or I have photographed when I'm out and about. What is this?
Rose of Sharon. Rose of Sharon.
That's a good guess.
Rose of
but
Sharon.
It's not a...
Keep rose mallow. Rose of Sharon.
It is a hardy hibiscus. So the other one I showed you was a tropical hibiscus. They tend to have shiny leaves or waxy looking leaves. They tend to have smaller flowers than the hardy. So these typically when they're in full bloom and they open up, these ones are not quite open. They are very large flowers. But take a look at the leaf. The leaf is more dull in color. It's a lighter green. What is that one?
Rose of Sharon, Rose of Sharon.
That is correct. That is a Rose of Sharon. So just let's back up here just to review these again. So here we have the tropical hibiscus with the glossy leaves. We have the hardy hibiscus with the duller leaves. They're not shiny. And then here we have the Rose of Sharon, and this photo just happened to be taken after a rain. All right, what is the flower in this landscape? Actually, it's a perennial plant with pink flowers. They don't have to be pink. Sometimes they're other colors. Anybody know what this one is?
A stilby?
Yeah, good job. That is a plant that tends to do better in part shade. I have seen, actually we've had one at the extension office and it burned up because it was getting too much sun. So put this one in a part shade location, preferably morning sun, afternoon shade. What is this? I use this as a cut flower, or I use in cut flower arrangements.
Eucalyptus?
Correct. What's that? This is a new variety I found this year. I'll tell you, this is Snapdragon. So these are, I found these at a greenhouse, a local family-owned greenhouse, and they have really long stems, which is good for cut flower arrangements. And I really like the flowers on this one. What's this? This is another cut flower I grow.
Anyone? Peony? Some kind of rose? Lisianthus? Tea
Lisiantha.
rose? Yep.
And that one, look at the leaves here. It's not a zinnia. Look at the
A
leaves.
dahlia?
Correct. This is a weed. Anyone?
Milkweed?
Honeyvine milkweed. I sometimes call it climbing milkweed because it climbs all over everything. It can choke the life out of plants and shrubs, and it grows on livestock panels, but it's a honeyvine milkweed. And do pick it or pull it off your plants before it opens up and blows seed everywhere. What's this?
Russian sage? Sage?
Cor-
Russian sage?
Correct. It's not one of my favorite plants, but this was growing on the Truman State University campus, and it actually looked good where it was growing. So there are places where this can be grown and look nice. So it has its place. What is this?
Moonflower?
Correct. That is moonflower. I grow this and I love this plant. It does not reseed itself and it stays put and it's beautiful at night. And it has just these gorgeous white flowers that are scented. What about that? I'll help you out. Butterflies like it.
Milkweed, pineapple sage, butterfly weed.
Butterfly weed that is growing in my parents' flower bed in Texas County. That one? I'll tell you, this is really pretty in the fall. That's witch hazel.
Yep, someone
That's
said that.
also,
Yeah.
Okay, good. I really like this one. It's growing also on my parents' farm in Texas County. And this,
Clematis.
Sweet Autumn Clematis. And I used to like this plant and bees and pollinators like it, but I'm getting to where I don't like this one much anymore because it is spreading. I am finding this in various places where I don't want it. And I'm pulling it out like a weed. So be cautious planting this and growing this plant. You'll be pulling out transplants. I only have 2 slides left. Let's look at this. What's going on here? This is a tomato. What is going on with this tomato plant? I'll just tell you, the seeds are sprouting. And sometimes that happens. You'll cut open a tomato, maybe even from the grocery store, and you'll notice that the seeds are sprouting. And we'll end with this one. What happened here? I'll just tell you, that's not a bug bite. It's environmental. Anyone want to guess? I'll tell you, that's sunburn. So often when your tomatoes are on the outer part, facing outward, they're not getting enough foliage cover. They will sunburn on, hot days and when it's really sunny. So
And someone said
that's all I have.
squirrel. Someone go back to the tomato one. So someone said squirrel, and it could be looked at on the top one. It almost looks like someone could have actually bitten into it. But if you look at the bottom one, it's not bitten into, but it's the same on both the top and the bottom. So the picture could have been a little bit deceiving because I could see where the top one looked like it could have been someone chomped into it. So
yeah, I can see that too. And yeah, the pictures could be deceiving. So and yeah, squirrels love tomatoes. They'll seek out tomatoes for moisture when it's hot and dry. So
thank you, Jennifer.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome.
Great pictures. What I'd like to do now is we're going to go ahead to Dr. Dave Trinklein, and he's going to talk about chrysanthemums. And of course, this time of the year is a perfect time for us to have chrysanthemums in our garden or to actually go to the store and purchase some.
Well, thank you, Debbie. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh my.
Let me make sure that you've got Oops, I went too far. You have share capability.
Oh, boy.
Would you like for us to come back to you?
Yeah, please do. I've got to figure out why it's not showing up. Please do.
Okay, and then perhaps in the chat box, if Jared's still around, maybe he and you can chat in the chat box back and forth privately and try to figure it out, if that's okay.
Sure.
What I'm going to do is, since you're going to be working with Jared, we were going to have him show a video, but we'll come back to that video here in just a little bit when we have that taken care of. Katie, are you ready? Did you want to talk about sunflowers?
Sure. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, and they're gorgeous pictures.
Okay. So I always grow sunflowers in my pumpkin patch, actually. And as you can tell, I also enjoy taking pictures of them. So when we think about sunflowers, a lot of times we think about these, yellow and bright, tall. But nowadays there's lots and lots of varieties of sunflowers out there. They can be planted early in the spring when after frost. They are definitely a warm season crop and do not handle frost. So they can be planted then or even later. So I plant mine when I plant my pumpkins. So that's mid June when I plant my pumpkin patch. So they get planted then in my garden patch. And so now I'm enjoying blooms right now. They have just started blooming in my patch. As mentioned, lots and lots of different kinds and colors out there. So if you like sunflowers and you like bright, happy flowers, there's lots and lots of options out there. There's also lots of options with sunflowers on size. So we can get sunflowers now that are short and actually meant for container growth. And we can get the huge Russian giants still that are dinner plate size heads and different kinds of sunflowers, different purposes for different kinds of sunflowers. So a lot of times we think of sunflowers for pretty, and they do make excellent cut flowers. However, the caveat with sunflowers, if you grow them yourself and cut them and bring them in, they do shed pollen, and sometimes that pollen can stain. So be aware of where you set that bouquet of sunflowers. And because of that problem, there are varieties of sunflowers that are pollenless. So they are marketed for the cut flower industry, and you can purchase those pollenless sunflowers. However, I like them with pollen because you can see it attracts bees. So you see, I see lots of bumblebees on mine. Right now, I've been noticing when I go out, soldier beetles. And as mentioned, sunflowers are fun to take pictures of in all stages. So this one in the bottom corner, it's not bloomed out yet, but it's very pretty even without the bloom open. Some more varieties of sunflowers, different kinds. And I showed this one because it had, when I started looking up, this was called a chimera. So it's part of the flower is that different color. And for whatever reason that year, I had lots of volunteer sunflowers from the previous year. And those volunteers came up as chimeras. So I had numerous plants that had sections that were a different color, which was really fun that year. But once again, lots of different colors, pollinators, and very pretty. However, we can also have other things that like them. And I'm surprised I haven't seen this happen yet this year. I noticed in my pumpkins, what is all this plant debris in the grass. And the squirrels had started attacking the sunflowers. So you can see the edge where they've eaten it off. And then they got more adventurous and just started cutting off the sunflower heads and putting them all on a stump together so they could enjoy their feast. Deer absolutely love sunflowers. So I've had some that they've nipped off all the sunflowers, which actually kind of helped because I had multiple stalks of sunflowers blooming, or they branched out because they nipped the tops off. That's another thing with different varieties of sunflowers now. It's not just one single head and you're done. So they'll have multiple stalks all along the stem that bloom, which is also nice. And there are some other insects that will chew on them. And then if you like birds, in this case, I was showing the squirrel damage. But the finches absolutely love them and will find them as soon as those sunflower seeds even start to dry. They will visit and help themselves. So sunflowers can also be kind of a self-feeding patch if you enjoy watching birds because they enjoy eating them. Also, if you feed sunflower seed in the wintertime for birds, a lot of times under a feeder, you will have volunteer sunflowers. So sometimes volunteers are a problem for people. Sunflowers are easy to control when they're little. So just run a hoe over it or pull them out. They're not that hard to control when they are little. But I don't care if they volunteer wherever the birds might plant them. I usually enjoy those sunflowers. And that's all I have for you.
All right. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that. You always take such pretty pictures. I thoroughly always enjoy your pictures. So Dave, oh, there you are. Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Can everybody see that? I'm going to go to presentation mode, okay?
Sure. Go ahead.
Now.
And it looks great.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for the technical problems, but I'm happy to be able to speak with the group again and share some information on what is a beautiful, beautiful plant at this time of the year, and that would be sunflower. A little bit of history before we get into the culture. First of all, chrysanthemum comes from Greek meaning golden flower. So evidently the early chrysanthemums were all gold in color. It has been cultivated as an herb in China for more than 3.5 millennia. And as a matter of fact, at one point, it was illegal for commoners to cultivate the plant as an herb in China. Only aristocracy, nobility, whatever they're called, were allowed to grow it. It passed through Korea into Japan around the 4th century. And as such, there is a lot of folklore and history that surrounds chrysanthemum in medieval Japanese society. I understand that chrysanthemum was emblazoned as a etching upon the sword of the Mikaido's warriors in Japan, perhaps symbolic of what, I'm not terribly sure. Crept into Europe in the latter part of the 17th century, where oddly enough, it didn't receive a lot of attention. But it arrived in the United States in the late 18th century, and now is the world's most important flowering plant from the standpoint of dollar value. This is because chrysanthemum is used both as a cut flower, and it's used as a potted flower, and it's used as a perennial flowering plant. So it's a plant that does have a lot of different uses. Now, that said, it belongs to the genus Chrysanthemum, and this keeps going back and forth with regard to scientific nomenclature. Morifolium, the X means that there's a hybrid in there somewhere in history. As Katie was talking about sunflower, this too is a member of the Asteraceae, previously Compositae, plant family. The flower of Asteraceae plant family members are called capitulum or capitulata for a plural. And they're characterized by an outer row of ray florets, which we might call petals, but they're really florets, and an inner disc of a tuft of disc florets. And in Katie's example, it would be the disc florets that gave rise to the sunflower seeds. It's important to note that the genetics behind chrysanthemum are very complex. It's actually a hexaploid. All animals in most plants are diploids, meaning they have 2 sets of chromosomes. Chrysanthemum has 6 sets of chromosomes, and this causes a lot of diversity within one species. Importantly, it is a photoperiodic short-day species, meaning that it blooms in response to long, uninterrupted periods of darkness that begin usually in the month of August as a trigger, and then the response time varies according to the cultivar. Many different flower types available with chrysanthemum, most often as they pertain to the appearance of the ray florets. Here you see a few of those listed by the American Chrysanthemum Society. Most of the flowers that are used, chrysanthemums that are used, either as cut flowers or certainly in the case of the garden mums, are the so-called decorative type, where there is a preponderance of ray florets, but there will be in the center at least one disc floret, hidden, but on the other hand, present. The growing of hardy chrysanthemums took a huge leap forward in the early 2000s with the introduction of what are called the Belgian or European influence mums, because there has been some hybridizing done. This has resulted in a plant that is just low, it's a bit later in maturity. And by that, the response time is a bit longer than early types of garden mums. But the flowers are just overwhelming with regard to numbers. Here you see 2 different cultivars. I show you a top view, and they are that perfectly symmetrical in the case of production by a local greenhouse. Well, a number of years ago, and I inherited this picture. I didn't take it, but nonetheless, chrysanthemums were grown in soil. And if you went to your local nursery to buy a mum for decoration in the fall, they'd hand you a shovel in a box and point you to the field. Or maybe they would go and dig it for you. Chrysanthemums are that resilient that you can dig them, and in so doing undoubtedly injure some of the root system, plant them, water them, and because of the cool temperatures associated with the time of the year chrysanthemum flower, they usually do fairly well. Today, we grow chrysanthemums in containers. I dare say that 99.9% are grown in containers, each container usually containing 1 plant and on drip irrigation. And here you can see toward maturity. Container-grown plants are grown in a peat-light soilless medium. So they require a lot of water, especially at this stage. And that's important to remember as we talk about using chrysanthemums in the landscape. First of all, a few buying tips. I would always purchase from a reputable greenhouse. It's good to buy in bud and not full bloom. In bud simply means that, okay, we can see the color. Perhaps we are that familiar with the cultivar that we know what it's going to be. But because it's not in bloom, it's going to last a long time. And if we choose to plant it in the ground, it will tend to establish itself more quickly. Always inspect for insects. Watch for wilting on one side of the plant. This is indicative of a disease called fusarium wilt, which is very problematic in chrysanthemums. And I would avoid clearance rack plants because they're there for a reason. They didn't sell. And if nobody else wants them, I don't think I would want them either. Post-purchase care depends a lot on your use. Most, about 90%, I would say, are kept in containers. Now, they might be repotted in a larger, more attractive container on the left, or they might be kept in the original container and double potted and watered in place. There are, though, some people who want to plant them in the ground, using them as annuals, and others who want to plant them in the ground so they come back next spring to be treated as a perennial flowering plant in your border. The overwintering, if we're planting them into the ground to use them as a perennial flowering plant, do not fertilize the plant in the fall. Chrysanthemums are reliably hardy through about zone 5, which includes most of Missouri. But nonetheless, putting on fertilizer in the fall, is not needed. The plant has, if you will, all the groceries in the bag with regard to surviving until frost. And then we cut it back after a killing hard freeze. It's probably a good idea to mulch at least the first winter. We do this to keep the soil from alternately freezing and thawing. And if you will, frost heaving the roots of the plant out of the ground. Remove the mulch when temperatures are warm in the spring. And then, depending upon the fertility of your garden soil, we might want to feed lightly when new growth forms in the spring. In this day and age, chrysanthemums pretty well take care of themselves. We don't tell people to go out and pinch them back until about the 4th of July to keep them bushy. These new Belgian type of mums naturally form into this dome shape with hundreds of blooms. The only downside, and I don't know that it is a downside, but they're not that early in blooming. So if you want something earlier, you're going to have to artificially provide long nights to your garden plants, and that is not an easy task to do. But nonetheless, put up with the fact they're a little bit later, but they will stay nice later into the fall so that you can enjoy the fruits of your labor. That's all I have, and I'll turn it back to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Dave. I always learn something new whenever you present, and especially the history of some of these different crops when you present is just amazing to me. So thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
So what I'd like to do next is we have a newsletter that comes out to those of us that are on campus. And yesterday, for a few minutes, I was like, I need a break from what I was doing. And I opened up the newsletter and I saw hidden music. And I was like, and it had a picture of an insect. And I was like, that's really, really interesting. So I opened it up and I read the article and then I watched the video and I was like, I got to share this with you guys. This is really, really cool. So Jared, are you ready? Turn your volumes up, folks.
Most of the animal sounds on Earth have never been heard by humans. With my background as a musician, I've always been interested in the sounds that occur in nature. Like if you can understand what their communication is about, you understand so much else of what's going on in their lives. Initially, I wanted to study birdsong. Even when I started my PhD, I was going to study communication in some flies that don't even make sounds, but I couldn't find them. But while I was looking for them, I did see these interesting little insects on a branch, and I borrowed some equipment from a friend, and I took it and went out in the backyard and found a plant with some tree hoppers on it, and I heard these great sounds. We don't directly perceive the signals that tree hoppers make. It's sounds that just travel through the plant that the tree hopper is on. And then if you kind of ask the insects by playing those signals back, they'll react differently to them too. Like, okay, here's the signal that I produce if I found food. Here's a signal I produce if I am threatened by a predator. Here's a signal I produce if I think it's time to leave. But they still can either synchronize or alternate or nearly synchronize in ways that allow them to kind of produce something that's a collective display, a little bit like a musical group, where it's bigger and more complicated and louder and longer than what one individual can do by itself. And it also has kind of more impact. Communication is at the heart of society. It's one of the main things that we do. Tree hoppers turned out to be better for studying communication and the evolution of communication than I ever could have imagined. They're very social, they live in groups, they communicate, they often have a very intense family life. The more you learn about the behavior, the more relatable they are. And when you mention insects to a lot of people, they have a negative reaction, maybe slightly, maybe a lot. But there are some kinds of insects that just about everybody likes. Butterflies, fireflies, they have a certain beauty and magic to them that really appeals to people, and they're harmless to people. And tree hoppers are insects that people would love if only they knew about them.
So totally fascinating, isn't that? And I was blown away. What it reminds me of is that a lot of times we hear people who have dogs and they might have a dog whistle and we blow the whistle. We can't hear that sound, but the dogs do. So it's just really fascinating to know that there's someone on our campus here at the University of Missouri that is actually doing this kind of work and research. When I showed it to some of my colleagues earlier today, they said, yeah, that's really cool. However, a tree hopper is not a good insect. It's probably an insect that's easier for the research to be able to quote unquote hear. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then also last year at the Extension Master Gardener Conference, we did it via Zoom last year. Dr. Tamara Real, she is our horticulture colleague that's over in the Kansas City area. And she did a presentation on this that she has heard. She's called Dr. Bug. And she actually did a presentation about what she's been able to find when insects are actually making sounds. And so Donna dropped that into the chat box, and we thought maybe you might like to download that and listen to what Tamara had to do with her presentation there. I have sent an email over to Dr. Cockcroft to see if you'd like to join us on Garden Hour in the future at some point and just, talk about, the world of insects with sounds. If you're interested, I'm happy to do that. If not, okay. You could be like my mom. Every insect is bad. Remember, not all of them are always bad. Donna, do we have time for you to be able to do your presentation still on compost?
Yeah, I can make it short and sweet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And let me find my okay, give me 1 second here. I gotta try to find this. Try to reshare. There it is. Okay. So, a question that I have been getting in regularly is the leaves are getting ready to fall. So what do I do about all the leaves that are getting ready to fall? A lot of times we see accumulation in no time, especially, especially since we're in a drought year for a lot of the state. We may be seeing it early. We may see it in abundance all of a sudden. So, we have to always be aware there's a lot of accumulation that's going to come. Why is it damaging to yards and landscapes? Well, it accumulates, it gets wet, it starts to smother things, it reduces sunlight, and it traps and holds the moisture. And so a lot of times our diseases get started early on, and by the time our growing season is full on us, we've got problems. And so these are all a reason not to let the leaves lay. You know, I'm a big believer in not burning. It's a great carbon source. It's a great way to start making organic matter that can feed our soils. And so I tell people all the time, you know, don't get rid of them. They're like gold to me. What you want to do is try to start to compost them. And so just keep that in mind as we move forward. So then the next question, obviously, that somebody might ask is, all right, if you want me to compost them, what exactly do they do to my soil? And how do I put together a compost bin? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So composting is actually the breaking down of browns and greens into an organic matter that can be used in a lot of our landscapes, in our gardens, and it can actually, once it's broken down and being utilized, can feed the soil. And so we don't equate it to nitrogen, but we say it is very nutritious for soils. And so any organic matter from a compost bin would be a real bonus for any garden soil out there. So the benefits these are just a few. There's numerous benefits out there about when using compost. It improves the soil structure, improves the aeration of the soil, improves root penetration, improves water movement. Just a lot of things go into being a benefit to the garden when it's added. And basically over to the right, it just showing that you're adding browns and greens together. And the microorganisms are the ones that do the work in breaking it down. And so, build it and they'll come. You don't have to worry about adding any compost starter. You don't have to worry about really adding anything. You also have to make sure to turn the pile or make sure there's a way that oxygen can get into the mix. And so that is by putting big limbs in or multiple sticks in that are in larger diameter. You can put a PVC pipe down that has holes drilled into it. Or you can just simply turn those piles. Now, I'm a lazy composter. I'll be the first one to admit it. I don't turn my pile, but it does manage to finally melt down if you are actively composting by turning and consistently adding moisture if it needs it, adding more browns or more greens if it needs it. It does break down within probably a couple of months. Typically finished product you'll have about you can have it in about 12 weeks. But just remember, it's a mix of browns and greens, and it's the microorganisms that come in, and what they do is they use the greens as fuel to eat the carbon source or the browns. And so just keep in mind, it has to be a good combination and in order for it to work. So when we're talking about compost bins, what we're looking for is a mass of materials of 3 to 4 foot square, cubics, I guess I should say cubic. So you envision a cube. So 4 foot deep, 4 foot tall, 4 foot. It can be 3 foot, but you don't want to get any bigger than that, because sometimes in a home situation, things start to get a little hairy, and you have to manage it a little bit more closely when it gets bigger like that. So when we're thinking about a compost bin, think about the money you want to spend on one, the ease that you want to do in building one. Is it going to be movable? And how accessible is it going to be? And so I just have some pictures here of some easy ways to put together a compost bin. The first one, of course, is just using a wire material. And you can get that at most hardware stores. So a 1-inch chicken wire or a 1/2-inch wide hardware cloth. Both those make a good sturdy place that you can go and put that compost in. And so what the other thing I like about it, this is very affordable. It's very movable. You know, it's very temporary. And so this would be an easy option if you want to test out composting and you're not for sure that you want something, you know, permanent. So this is one way. So all you're doing is making a ring, wiring it closed. You might set a couple stakes to secure it, make sure the wind doesn't take off with it, but very simple to put up. The next one is just reusing some pallets. Seems like when I go by through town, I'm always seeing piles of pallets here or there at some of the bigger businesses. And a lot of times it's free for the taking. And so you can connect in a U shape 3 pallets, and then you can put a front edge on it also if you want to put a shorter one. But this is the way where it's easier to reach in and turn it with a shovel. Once again, easy, it's inexpensive, you know, easy to put together. So, you know, hey, this would be my go-to also. I like the wire idea. I like this. If you want to do something more permanent, you can do things like cinder blocks. And so once again, all you're doing is making a U shape out of it. And so the front side you would be digging out of, the front side you would be turning the compost. So these are just 3 pretty easy ways to put together a compost bin. Now, there are all sorts of different compost bins that you can find on Amazon and Walmart and Lowe's and all the different places that you can buy from. And you can even get the drums that you can turn and get compost in really less time than these methods. And so, you know, there are lots of different options. And so just take a look and see what's going to suit your situation the best. But just remember that it's the basic compost concepts that you need to keep in mind. Doesn't matter what you're putting it in. Rule of thumb, 2/3 carbon to 1/3 nitrogen. Make sure that it's just wet enough that it's like a squeezed out sponge. You want to make sure to turn it to get that oxygen in it. Remember that smaller the pieces, the faster the breakdown. And remember, you want those browns and greens. So browns are like the leaves that we're going to start accumulating, and then greens are like grass clippings or the vegetable refuse that we constantly have in the household. And so a mixture of these two things can really create a wonderful, what we call it, black gold. And so try your hand at composting and see what happens. Okay, back to you, Debbie.
Thank you. We had 2 questions come in for sure.
Okay.
One is, what is the diameter and height of the chicken wire bin that you showed a picture of?
So a lot of the wire comes in increments of 12 inches, so 18 inches or 24 inches. I would definitely go with a 36-inch at least wide.
Okay, and about how high?
Well, that's what I'm saying, 36-inch high.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood what you said.
Yep.
Okay, great. And then another person said, how do you compost vegetable plants to ensure that adding the compost back to the garden does not serve to spread or inoculate plant diseases back into the garden? Do you have a trick of the trade for that?
Very, very easy. I mean, I'm sorry, very good question. It's easy because anything that is splotched or diseased or doesn't look right, don't put it in. So if you know your tomatoes have blight, you know you're going to send those somewhere else. I know another thing, I say squash and pumpkin vines, that's a no-no because you can overwinter the squash bugs with it. And so there are some things that are no-nos. But for the most part, a lot of things can go in. And then on weeds, don't put anything with a seed head on it. Always make sure that it is free of seeds when you're even putting those in. So there are some rules of thumb. And, you know, if you have a lot of questions, seek out one of us in the field, a field specialist, or even take some of our classes.
And it's funny, we had this discussion about compost this morning on our IPM about how some diseases, those structures will still overwinter in compost because we can't get them hot enough to kill those overwintering structures.
Good point, because our compost piles in the summer will get up to 140, 150.
All good information. Yeah, thank you, Donna. You have something else to add?
No, I was just saying in the winter they will struggle to even get up to 80 or 90 in some cases.
And when some of us actually had an opportunity to do some educational programming down in the Bahamas, and down there, what they would do is they would take like the plastic container, like topsoil would come in, or your potting mix, and put all the different things in the bag for composting with a little bit of water and a little bit of fertilizer. And then tie up those bags and let them sit in the sun, and they had pretty quick compost at that point. But again, their climate is a little bit different. I know we're running just a minute or two long, but Katie, there was a question that came in. Perhaps you could answer it. We had a sunflower head that seems to be ripe, could see stripes on the hulls, but all of the seeds were empty. There was nothing inside. Is that a pollination problem, and why?
Yes, I would say that's a pollination issue. And the other issue might also be that seeds will not fill when we are too dry. And we see that with a lot of different plants that struggle in drought also. But without seeing it, hard to say, but could be either of those, pollination and or drought.
Thank you, Katie. And like I said, we're going just a few minutes long, so I will pull a PowerPoint back up again. Just want to let you all know that we will be here next week for the garden hour, and that will be our last weekly garden hour. And then we'll do monthly, the third Wednesday of the month from noon to 1 in October, November, December, and January, February, and March. So you'll be getting a email reminder to next week on Wednesday, and then on a monthly basis, you'll get that email reminder that the garden hour is taking place. We'll also have it recorded out on the IPM YouTube channel, and we hope to see you back here next week. Thank you for joining us.